in USA. So an exciting early morning for me. In my current role, I'm part of the HR leadership at KPMG in the US. I'm very pleased to welcome you on behalf of IMA Young Leaders Council and would like to thank them for organizing this session and giving me the opportunity to moderate this discussion with two stalwarts who I'll be delighted to introduce to you in a moment. Am I at the right company? Am I in the right job? And is this all there is? What is this rut about? Where is life and work headed? Am I doing enough? I have 15 years of solid work life left and so much more to achieve. Midlife crisis as a phrase was coined by Elliot Jaques, a psychoanalyst in 1965, for those of you who didn't know. His work essentially focused on artists who felt unfulfilled by their previous work. In 2008, though, more recently, the economist David Blanchflower and Andrew Oswald found that self-reported life satisfaction takes the form of a gently curving U, beginning high in youth, bottoming out in our mid-40s, and then recovering as we get older. The pattern is robust around the world, affecting both men and women, and while it is gentle, the economists concluded that it was significant. My guess is if you are attending this session, most of you fall in one of these categories. You have experienced mid-career dilemma, or you are experiencing it currently, or you're getting signals and therefore want to brace yourself. In a nutshell, what I want to say is that it is a ubiquitous concept and an age-old concept. So being in either of these categories is perfectly okay. Today's session does not attempt to answer all the questions for you. So that's my disclaimer to begin with. It's going to be a combination of self-reflection and some storytelling and some experience sharing by our panelists. We intend to delve into their situations and hear about how they dealt with it and help others deal with this dilemma. So let's dive in. So introducing our first panelist for the evening, Ritesh Chopra. Ritesh is a partner and the Chief Operating Officer and Head of Capability Hubs at KPMG Global Services. In a career spanning over 24 years, Ritesh has worked in consulting, business research, supply chain, pricing, marketing analytics, and process improvement areas across US, UK, and Asia. He has been responsible for starting and leading large offshore knowledge teams spanning across research, analytics, benchmarking, knowledge management, creative and marketing services, and sales and account support. Ritesh, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you, Ayman.
Our second panelist this evening is Vinayak Sastri. He is a global leader at a leading technology company. Vinayak is a business leader with extensive experience of over 22 years in helping clients build global capabilities that can scale across countries and industries. He has a proven track record of driving change, delivering results, transforming, and developing high-performance teams. With his focus on innovation, Vinayak is able to seamlessly bridge the gap between business, technology, and cultures, owing to his well-rounded background and his role as an executive coach. And Vinayak has helped many individuals cope through their mid-career dilemmas. So Vinayak, welcome.
Thank you, Abhishek. Delighted to be here. And thank you very much, Ayma, for this particular platform.
Great. So let's dive in. Let's begin our conversation. And my first question to both is to both of you. Can you both speak to us about your understanding of mid-career dilemmas? Let's just ground and anchor ourselves in what encompasses mid-career dilemma. And candidly, have you dealt with it yourselves in your lives? And if so, how have you dealt with it? I certainly don't want to put you on a spot, right off the bat, but please share what you can. Ritesh, we can start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Abhishek. And that's an interesting question when you talk about mid-career and a mid-career dilemma. Uh, I don't think there's an age which defines when that mid-career is. In my view, I guess a career spans at least the 3 decades of work at least. And in that, there are many situations that all of us come across, and especially in the last 8, 10, 12 years with the disruption that happens in the industry, where there are times when you go back and question yourself, I've been doing this work for the last so many years. Going forward, what do I do? Do I need to go back, reskill myself? Do I need to go out, find out something which puts me out of my comfort zone? That, in my view, is the dilemma which comes in. It could be 2 years down the line, it could be 5, it could be 10, it could be 15. I don't think the time is a definition. I guess it is at any point of time you're going about and redefining your own career, you're defining your own trajectory, your own skill sets, and which also could lead to, in most of the cases, learning something which you've not done before. So that's my definition, and I think happy to jump into an instance. But Vinayak, why don't you share what do you think of mid-career dilemma?
No, I think spot on, Ritesh. You've laid it out very nicely. Just to share from my standpoint, personally, in addition to what Ritesh just said, I also think of it as multidimensional. I mean, one is in terms of options, whether too many or too little. I think today it's a problem of plenty, whereas many years ago it was a problem of probably too less. The other dimension, of course, is in terms of skills. And Ritesh, like you rightly said, should I upskill? Should I reskill? Should I cross skill? Should I not skill? Or should I unskill? That's also a word that's come out there. The other dimension, which I think, when I think of it much deeper, is basically in terms of purpose. So there are a lot of people who are, in terms of trying to identify what is their purpose in life and what is their purpose in terms of their career that's helping them take there. And that's also causing, I might say, a lot of internal tension in terms of, am I really aligned to that? And Abhishek mentioned about the U curve, which when one thinks of it, it can be scary too. And to really come up there. So given where we are, given the amount of time there is, are we in line with our purpose? And I don't think it's a matter of age. It can happen early career, it can happen mid-career, it could be in a role that one has spent a lot of time. So I think those are the dimensions which I think are actually coming out there.
Right. No, that's interesting, Vinayak. And I think, Abhishek, to your point, you mentioned the U. I'm at the beginning of the U. I'm in my youth right now.
There you go. Yeah, it's all in the mind.
Yeah, and I think to your point about personal experience, I think there are many. I think the most recent one that comes to my mind is in my current organization itself. And we were working together at that time, Abhishek. And this is the time where I've largely been doing service delivery, leading teams, working for global clients all my career. And when an opportunity came to me to say that, do you want to take on the chief operating officer role for the firm that I work for? It was a moment for me to think about. It is something which I've not done before. It was managing functions which were like finance, IT, admin, facilities, which I have been a user of. I probably have been more on the pain side of giving pain to the function, saying things are not working right. But now it was time to move tables, come on the other side, and look at, as a service provider, how do I make sure the functions work for the benefit of the business? It was a tough decision. It was something which was, you wondered that, having worked close to 20 years in a very different environment, am I ready to go back and redefine my journey by saying, let me pick up something which I don't know anything about? And I think I'm very happy. It's been 3.5 years I've been in this role. I'm still learning, but I think that's one example where about 3.5 years ago is where I went back and went in this same journey that we were talking about.
Right. And I remember some of those conversations you and I had when you were taking up the CEO role. But I must say, having observed you from a distance, you've done a great job at it. So
Thank you.
that I would like to add to, I mean, we are talking of experience sharing here. I was in the role of HR leader at KPMG Global Services in India till about 2019 when an opportunity came about in the US. I had a zillion doubts in my head, having never worked outside of India, uh, and and I took the plunge because I I have to admit I was going through a little bit of a dilemma, and the only person I was speaking to at that point in time were extensively was my family, and wondering, would come back and say, where am I headed? And then this opportunity came, and I took it, and I took it because I was potentially going through a mid-career dilemma. Uh, but having taken the plunge, I can tell you the first 1 year, and very candidly in this forum, wasn't easy for me. Moving mid-career into a different culture, taking up a different role, I realized I had to quickly unlearn a number of things and relearn a number of things, and some of it, to be very honest, I wasn't ready for. So it wasn't easy to, and it's now been 3 years, and I'm happy I took the decision. But the first 1 year, I constantly doubted myself, and we'll talk a little bit more about it subsequently. But let me just switch again to my next question. Both of you mentioned skilling in some form or shape. I want you to understand, is reskilling, upskilling at a career stage we are in, is that easier said than done? And if it is, if one has to focus on reskilling themselves, technologies, the digital skills that are ubiquitous, how does one focus on it? And Vinayak, you come from a technology background. I'd ask you this question about what technologies can we focus on? What are the kind of digital skills we should acquire? And how do we know that we are going in the right direction?
Wow, that's a tough question, Abhishek. So, and the reason I say it's tough is, I mean, not to make light of it, but it's a very good question, and it's a very broad question. Just like both of you shared in terms of having a mid-career dilemma, I've also had, one of several, and to candidly put it, having been on the business side of things, one of the key dilemmas for me was, should I exactly do that? Should I upskill myself in the area of technology? If so, what area? And I was searching for an answer for quite a long time. And, at times, and I can candidly share here as well, is at times you feel that, you've put in years of work, years of experience, and now should I really, switch to something on the technology side? Or is it something which can help me in terms of the area of business? There's no easy answer. There's no straight answer. But I'll share what a mentor of mine, actually helped me think through this in this particular process. And it's basically, so he said 2 criteria. So one could be in terms of what excites you. So for example, a lot of us were probably very excited with maths or science or humanities or whatever it is in our early years, and we're probably not applying as much in our areas of work. So that could be one logical clue in terms of what skills. So when I say maths, it could be in the area of analytics. If you're somebody who is interested in, let's say, the arts or the humanities, maybe design is an area, or design thinking is an area that you could look at. So that's one dimension to it. The other is, of course, in terms of what is the broader direction in which, let's say the organization that you work for or the industry that you're a part of it is going forward. So for example, in the technology space, today everyone talks about moving on to the cloud. There is something called as on-premise or on-premise, and then moving on to the cloud. So my view is that, understanding what cloud is, understanding, how is it structured, I think gives you an edge in terms of trying to understand what are the pain points that your clients might have, what is it that they're grappling with, what is it they're thinking with, etc., etc. So that's one dimension in which you could look at. The other is, when one looks at digital, so digital is of course a very broad area, but today, fortunately, unfortunately, it's something that, is going to be a part of us, as we go ahead. So certainly skills in that particular area. So if somebody is interested in programming, can certainly do programming. But today it is, that's on one side of the spectrum. But on the other end of the spectrum is, how do you actually deploy such programs? Based on certain client needs, how do you actually structure them? What's the thinking that goes around it? So those are areas in which, thinking can certainly evolve. I mean, is this something that is very much needed? This is something I discovered through my own painful journey, over a few years. And then, and as you start getting onto the journey, and Ritesh, I think, alluded to it earlier, is you're out of your comfort zone. It looks like you're in a dark alley and, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. But all of a sudden, there are all these other doors that start opening up and some really exciting opportunities come along the way. So that's what I'd like to share. Back to you, Abhishek.
Right.
Yeah, and
Vinayak,
Abhishek, sorry,
yes,
go ahead.
sorry, Ritesh. No, you go ahead. I'll chime in later.
No, just a small point there. I think about upskilling, reskilling, adding any skill. I guess in my view, there is one common mistake people at times make, which is wanting to learn everything on day one and thinking that if it's a new area, to the point that Vinayak mentioned, if it's when you're changing a career, do you really need to understand how to program, or do you need to understand how technology will affect business? Or so you need to define your curriculum in terms of, this is what I need to learn, this is what I need to master, and this is something where I have experts who I can rely on, and who are those people, what is my ecosystem I can work on. Because if you want to go back and start reskilling and want to start from scratch and become a master at everything, then you won't have enough chances in your life to build up new careers or new options there. So that definition is extremely important, defining what I need to learn, and then what I really need to be great at.
Yeah, and just to add, great point, Ritesh. Sorry, Abhishek. Just wanting to build on that is, that's why looking at adjacencies. So in terms of, so let's say if you're interested, somebody wants to become a data scientist, but you need not necessarily know Python programming. I mean, of course, it's good to know, it helps. But what are the adjacencies given your role? Let's say if you're in a role in finance or in logistics, or you're in a client-facing or sales role. So, so that sort of helps, navigate in terms of, to Ritesh's point, not really learning everything, but basically learning, what really intersects with what you do and what you're passionate about.
Right. And the one word I caught on to, I think from both of you, is purpose. And I think linking that to what your purpose is and where you're headed, and therefore getting onto skills is going to be key. But let me now shift my focus to organizations. And Ritesh, this one is for you. Workplace has all ages represented. If we were to believe the two economists I quoted earlier, typically you experience midlife crisis. There's no age as such, but it could last anywhere between 10 to 15 years. From an age gap perspective, not it wouldn't last. I didn't mean that. I'm saying it could start in your mid 30s to late 40s, right? So for most part, you will be at a fairly senior position, making decisions in your organization, on a day-to-day basis, in a strategic role. And if you're in that kind of a role and you're going through this crisis, how do you manage your workforce, who may predominantly be millennials and Gen Z? So you have this age group that's going through a midlife crisis, and there's an age group that's all charged up, ready to go, want to take on the world. and they're in a management and managed position, how do you insulate yourself from the issues you're facing personally?
A great question, Abhishek. And I think in this case, one has to look at two things. One, in my view, is uh, this false belief that I know all the answers is probably a folly a lot of leaders ending up in. It is okay to have your areas where you can come across saying that I don't know the answer, or this is something that's going in my mind. There are many people I've worked in, younger people who I go back and at times bounce off ideas. Say, this is what's going on in my mind. What do you think about it? And you'll be surprised the answers that you can get from people who don't probably have the experience that you have, but have a fresh perspective to things. Really helps. I guess one is that the answer could come from anyone, and if you have a relationship with people in your team where you can go back and set out these examples and ask people what would they do if they were in your place, you can get a very different perspective. So that's one. I think the second piece is about how do you include a larger group in what you're doing. So the problem that you are facing in your career is not isolated only to you. It affects the organization. It affects the entire team. It impacts all the people who are involved with there. So it's not only your people in office. It's also the family that is there. So when you're working on a situation, you have to look at what I do, how will that impact, and is there a fallback if it doesn't work? How do I make sure I have that in place when I'm going around? So not an easy answer. I think it's something which typically you end up building those relationships and sort of it's like a trust circle that you develop.
Right. Vinayak, do you have anything to add to that from your experience?
No, just one thing. I think Ritesh summed it up very nicely. Is an open-minded attitude. So anyone. So it really doesn't matter across age groups or roles or whatever. I think that's really the key that brings up this.
Right. And I think from my perspective, wearing my HR hat, I'm thinking of this this answer from both of you as an organizational culture issue where open and honest conversations can thrive.
Yeah.
So staying on to organizations, we often see organizations talking about bringing your whole selves to work. So if I'm dealing with a dilemma, should my manager know? And why don't both of you give us your perspectives on whether I should bring in my manager into this mix? Vinayak, why don't you go first?
Sure. My answer, based on various experiences, I think it depends. It actually depends on, the individual, the situation. Personally, because there would be situations, dilemmas that I'm going through, which sometimes I think that I'm capable of handling at my end, or, I want to solve it to a particular logical point before I bring my manager in. In other instances, I've seen that, when I've reached out for help, to managers, absolutely, it's given me a completely different perspective. It's helped, actually understanding whatever it is that I was going through. And it could be something as simple as, should I make a career switch within roles? In some of the organizations that I have been a part of, I've also moved laterally. A lot of times, there is this apprehension that if I move laterally, am I foregoing something? Whether it's in terms of growth, rewards, whatever it is. But a lot of times, managers have helped me understand in terms of what it actually means and, how it broadens, the dimension that I had. A few years ago, I had this dilemma of should I be, continuing to run my own startup, which had no funding, or should I, take a career in business for some time? And again, a manager of mine actually helped me sort of understand that, in perspective, in terms of the skills, sometimes, when you work for organizations and what was lacking. So that feedback actually really helped me. So I think it depends, and also based on people that I've worked with and I've seen, colleagues, friends, family members, etc. Sometimes they like to deal with their own things before they bring it to you. At other times, they certainly reach out to help. But as a manager, I think one should definitely be welcoming to the fact that, hey, I'm open to have a conversation, and we can sort of chug through this together, so to speak.
Right. Thank you, Vinayak. Ritesh?
No, I echo what Vinayak just said. So I think there's no one answer to that. It all depends upon the relationship you create and you develop with your manager. Personally, I've been very lucky to have all my managers who I've had a freedom to talk to whenever I've faced a situation where it could be, like Vinayak said, a new role within the organization. It could be something outside. It could be looking at doing something differently, or even just the fact that, am I adding value? At times the question that comes to your mind, and if that relationship is strong enough, that is where you can ask. But if it's not, I think one has to be careful of what is the right time to do that. And in that case, you need to find out who is the other person I need to bounce off my thought process with. You can't take this decision on your own. So ideally, yes, you should. But I think I really like the point that Vinayak said towards the end, that I think as leaders, we have this huge responsibility to create an environment where the people that we work with feel free to come in and voice their opinion, because culture of an organization is not written by rules. It's done by what people observe, what happens on the floor, what happens in the organization. So if you do it, you people will see you doing it. The others will end up imbibing what you do, and especially the younger folks will see you doing it, and they'll do it with their teams. So I think our responsibility here, one, for ourselves, first find out if that relationship exists, or work on that at the right time. Don't wait for a situation where you have a dilemma and that's when you think, oh, I haven't worked on the relationship, now what do I do? uh, Everyone will face that situation. So try and gauge that, try and work towards a relationship where that trust exists. But as a leader, I think create that environment across the organization is absolutely an imperative in my view.
Great. My takeaways are lead by example, reach out proactively if required, and build relationships with trust embedded in it. So thank you. And I see a comment in the comment section saying it may also depend on the relationship and the personality of the manager and yourself. I think Vinayak alluded to it, and so did Ritesh. So clearly, relationship is a key element of this. So I'd request here the audience to post your questions in the chat. I will keep going back to the chats to see if there are any comments or questions. So please feel free to type in there. I will now turn my attention to a topic that is fast gaining traction in the world of work, and that is mental health. Now, we know this topic we are discussing is about mental strength, amongst others, and loosely can fall in the mental health space, right? So, and to a great extent, this becomes an organization's. This becomes my apologies, an individual's fight. So, again, I'm going back to the role of the organization in helping people cope with this dilemma. I know some of it, I can understand that some of the answers for this question may be repetitive, but I still want to focus on what can organizations do. Do they have a role to begin with, or is it an individual's fight? We have seen that it is ultimately the individual, or at best their families, that are left to deal with it. There is, of course, there is in a great way a stigma attached to it, right? So, and I, being here in the US in an HR function for the last 3 years, I can say that this is it's the same anywhere. So, how are organizations helping here? Can they actually help? I mean, if I'm dealing with my own personal battle here, and I'll ask these questions to both of you.
Sure, Vinayak, I'll go first if that's okay. I think Abhishek, you alluded to something in the beginning of this chat, which you said, get your whole self to office. If you are saying that and looking at the amount of time one spends at the workplace, and thanks to the current pandemic, last 21 months, the workspace is anyways the definition of office and workspace has grayed out. There is people sitting in the bedroom, and it's the office which is there. But uh, from an organization perspective, if we are expecting people to come in and bring in their true self to work, you can't say that keep your mental health, mental issues, mental problems at work, at home, and don't bring them to your workplace. I think that's not being fair, first of all. Uh, but at the same time, organizations, we've got to understand there are two parts to an organization. An organization as a company, or an organization as a group of people. I think as a company, I think the bare minimum an organization, in my view, needs to do is provide the right infrastructure around when somebody needs help, who to reach out to, what are the different modes in which somebody can go and speak their mind, get an opinion, get some expert help. So putting that system into place, which can be used by any individual in the firm as and when they want. So that's from a company perspective. I think from a group of people perspective, it goes back to the point we were just talking about, having that trust. Because when you're talking about a mental health issue, you're talking about something which is extremely personal. And you will not do that till the time you trust somebody, that if I'm putting my thoughts bare on the table, is somebody going to take advantage of it? Is somebody going to mock me? Or somebody in the end going to belittle me and make me feel even worse? As long as we work on, first of all, negating those thought processes, and then working towards how we can help in a situation that is there. To your point, like you started this discussion, we may not have all the answers, but at times, as leaders, as colleagues, as the people that you work with, you can provide an ear where somebody can come in and discuss something. You can give your opinion. May not be the right answer, but also you can point somebody out to who to speak to. So I think both go in parallel. The system, the process, definitely, I think organizations need to have that in place as an option, because you are spending a significant amount of your waking time in office or at workplace. And that is the time, if you have an option, it works well for all the employees.
No, I think very well put, Ritesh. And I really like the point you mentioned about fear, or fear, basically whether fear of what people will say or how it will be perceived or taken advantage of. And I think personally, I think that that's where if enabling systems are there, which sort of help mitigate to whatever extent possible that fear, and then the collective, it usually starts with a group of individuals, somebody close to that particular individual, either colleagues or friends or teams, and then sort of, if there is a platform, there are mechanisms which are available to certainly do that, that can certainly help. And yeah, these last 21 months have certainly shown us to how important it's become. I mean, it's sort of become front and center, of various discussions. So, absolutely agree with that, because and that is something that will really help, professionals, to really move forward. And, that's also one of the ways of many to help tackle some of those dilemmas, because a lot of times, I have found out personally, is sometimes, I have notions, fears about a particular role, job, whatever it is, and it's all in my head. It is nothing, it's not out there. It's when you actually start doing it, it may be simpler or harder, but the main thing is you move forward in that particular direction.
Right. And yeah, so what I hear from both of you is creating safe spaces in office, and ensuring psychological safety of people that work for us. So great. And I think a lot of work that needs to be done. There is a lot of academic research on psychological safety, and I think many of us who are in leadership roles here have that responsibility. Now, I do have a few questions in the chat box that I want to read out. One particularly, and Vinayak, maybe I'll ask you this: are we talking about any special skills for entrepreneurship? And especially many of us who move from a corporate career into doing something on our own, almost mid-career. And of course, there are many questions we are asked, not only by ourselves but by people around us, right? So is there a special skilling need there for entrepreneurship?
Oh, great question. And it's a subject by itself. I mean, there is a lot of literature. I mean, there are a lot of people who talk about it. But I think the single biggest thing that which I have gathered based on discussions and reading about it, and also working with a few people around it, is this ability to unlearn. So while we've heard about this a lot in terms of hey, this is something that we should unlearn, but that ability to unlearn is something which is which a lot of people have said is probably the single most determinant. And it could be unlearning anything. It could be unlearning about corporate system, to how clients work, to managing teams, to something as simple as doing administration tasks, etc. So that's really the biggest thing there. The second is, of course, how to deal with from moving from certainty to uncertainty. I mean, there is a relative degree of certainty, and moving to a relative degree of uncertainty, at least based on whichever phase you are in at entrepreneurship. So that's the other big area. Basically the whole idea of being comfortable with more dilemmas, so to speak, because entrepreneurship also brings out a lot more dilemmas, tests your decision making, etc. So I think those are the two biggest things. And of course, I won't go into all the other literature which talks about self-belief, faith, and all of that, but because everyone has a different story. But ultimately, it's really being able to put your skills to the test, so to speak.
Right. Ritesh, any thoughts on people you may know who moved into on their own and their experiences?
No, I guess Vinayak spoke from his personal experience, which is really worthwhile. And
that's why I asked him the question first.
And the point which really stands out for me is when he said that get used to working different across many things. So you could be the HR person, you could be the finance person, you could be doing administrative tasks in your own, in the entrepreneurial venture you start with. And that also, with that brings along, that means you're running 6-7 different careers. And each of them will come up with a question mark at some point of time. Is it worth it? I think being able to answer that question to yourself is a skill in terms of being able to look forward and say, these are challenges which will come in, anticipate them, and be prepared in terms of either yourself or seek help. But the ability to foresee the future becomes extremely more important in an entrepreneurial setup, I guess. And that's my guess. I've never been in one, and I don't think I have that in my mental makeup or a DNA to do that. But we'll see.
Right. Never say never. I have a comment in the chat about this topic, and someone who's a researcher in entrepreneurship says that there is an absolute metamorphosis across the entrepreneurship life cycle. So find where you are in the arc of change across the life cycle. So I think that's an important comment. So I will. The next question I have, and I'll continue to encourage the audience to post their comments and questions in the chat box. We are coming up at the 45 minutes of this discussion, and we've kept the last 15 minutes to really take live questions from the audience. So look forward to that. Both of you, at the levels you are in your organizations, hire talent, and often at senior levels, and let's it's safe to assume that many of those individuals are actually interviewing with you as a result of a mid-career dilemma. They want to change, they want to do something different. They've been in a company for 20 years. What is it that you're looking for? And if you happen to spot a mid-career dilemma issue with that individual, what's your reaction? I mean, they probably won't share it with you, but if you happen to spot it, what is it that you're looking for? I mean, a broad question is, many of us may be preparing for the next interview as a result of having done this enough now. I need a change. At that level, so tell me, what are you looking for? And if you spot it, what's your reaction? Anyone of you can go.
Yeah, sure. Maybe Ritesh, I'll go first. So personally, in terms of this particular question, and I think you hit the point, the nail on the head in terms of what's the dilemma. I mean, the dilemma sort of doesn't come out, very clearly, but I think understanding what's the motivation for the change. I mean, and that really sort of leads into what's really driving that change. Is it because somebody's been an entrepreneur and wants to come back to seek stability? Somebody's looking at has been stable and now looking to do something different. There are some who are looking to test themselves in terms of what is it that they can do next. Can they move in a particular area or not? Or it could just simply be a question of continuity, that I am good at this particular area. I tried others. I think it's best I come back to an area that I'm good at, so to speak. So it could be, this is just a small snapshot of several other scenarios that could be possible. So I think understanding that underlying motivation in terms of what's that change becomes important. Obviously, relevance in terms of whether it's experience, suitability, of course, all of that, various organizations have various criteria around it. But the third most important thing that personally, I also like to see is in terms of curiosity. So is the individual curious to learn, to grow, in terms of what's really their attitude, given their motivation as well. Because a lot of times, I have failed at roles where I thought I would succeed, given, let's say, whatever credentials and experience that I bring. But, sometimes I just didn't get the basics right. Whereas in certain other roles, I sort of managed to succeed, or sort of did okay, because I was able to adapt to those roles. So adaptability also becomes a criteria, again, purely driven by my own experience. And because that's where I find that a combination of that adaptability, curiosity, understanding that motivation, and then one can help the individual sort of succeed in terms of whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish, and the larger teams are trying to accomplish. So that's how I would sort of answer that question. I know not a straight answer, but your question got me thinking. And so those are some of those dimensions that sort of come out when you're looking at that.
Right.
I guess Vinayak, just building on to what you said, I personally, for me, when I'm taking an interview, this is the most important part of the entire process, because this particular question or line of questioning in terms of the why, goes back to the point we made about purpose. We spoke about what's driving the change. I guess helps me identify a couple of things. One, like you said, the attitude of the person. So, and from a fit perspective, will that fit into what we are looking at? So the answer in terms of why am I looking for a change and why am I sitting here in this room does highlight that. The second thing, which I think is extremely important, the value system of the person comes out in an answer like that. So and when I say value system, I mean 2 or 3 broad themes there. One, integrity. Am I being, it is usually very clear about the answer that you get, that are you being true to yourself? Are you being true to what is being answered? And are you honest about it? So I guess that's one. I think the second thing that comes out is respect for people. The situation that you are in, uh, do you end up not respecting the people that you are working with or currently working with? I guess that definitely comes out in a question like this. The third thing is around the willingness to change and willingness to make an impact. Am I a person who's externalizing every problem to the to the neighbor, to the neighbor's dog, to everyone else but me? Or am I owning up to areas where I could have done differently and what I'm looking for? So this anyone who is looking for a change at a mid to senior level typically will be asked this question because they would have worked in that organization for a while. Why are you looking for a change? And that answer for me is a make or break in most of the cases. Assuming to your point, the technical and the compatibility and skills, all that is taken care of. All that being same, I guess this answer typically is a make or break because your true self comes out in that answer, in my view.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm sure many of us preparing for our next interview will keep that in mind and prepare for that question in particular. We're coming to the fag end of the question answer session, and the one question I did want to allude to is Ritesh. I know you've done some work around different generations at workplace, and we alluded to this earlier. Anything from that multi generational diversity in the firm study that you had done, and how do you harness the power of all ages in an organization?
Interesting point again, Abhishek. I think, especially in the services industry, the industry that you and I work in, and Vinayak's a part of. In fact, people of our age are probably the minority now. So we'll have to talk about diversity from a very different angle there, because the millennials and the Gen Zs are the majority of the workforce that anyway is there. But I think bringing it back to careers and working with millennials on that, I think millennials or Gen Zs now, who are also in the workforce, by the way, I think the important part is how do you have that conversation or a discussion with a millennial, with a Gen Z. The reason why I'm saying that is it is very easy to come in and say, I have seen the world. That is what always happens. And that is what should be done. I think that is a very common mistake quite a few of us make. And the moment you're doing that, you're alienating yourself from the group you're talking to. Are you going in with an open mind for any conversation, any discussion? I think that is the make or break. A very simple example I'll take. You will, in your corporate world life, mentor, give advice to a lot of people. But the moment you start doing that to a child at home, anyone who has children who are probably in teens or late that age group, the moment you start giving an advice at home, there is that vested interest that comes in, or the belief that you are saying this because you are a parent. I think that you can't bring that to the workplace. I guess the learning that you would bring in from office to home is, if I'm giving advice to somebody or am I seeking input from somebody, I'm coming with an open mind. Many times at home, we don't do that. And I think there are learnings both ways. You take learnings from home to office and office to home. And that's how we become more inclusive as individuals. And it is not being inclusive at work or inclusive at home.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I
could see Vinayak nodding his head on the children
Vinayak,
point.
any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I was going to say including preteens. So when you say teens, it's also preteen. So they're able to sniff out your vested interest straight away. So yeah, it gets smarter and smarter. But I think you very well put, very nicely summed it up.
Right. I don't see more questions. Some great comments for the panelists. But I'm going back to the questions that we had received when we had come in. I think the one point I wanted to talk about, which I see repeated even in the comments that we collected, is change management. Now, change management is a concept we know in organizations. Any thoughts on personal change management? How do you change manage your own life when you're going through this? So, any learnings or any experiences you can share there? Any one of you?
Yeah, sure. So I think it depends on the type of change. Is the change forced on you, or is it a change that you are driving at? Because the approaches become very different. Obviously, a change which is forced on you, and for a lot of us, and these are external circumstances. For example, the pandemic itself, a great example which has impacted all of us. How we actually respond to that becomes a question of, it's uncovering day by day. There's no set plan around it. Personally, I would like to be in a situation where, I can sort of, influence or force the change on myself. Be, as they say, be proactive, or to rather than react to something, or be adaptive to it. And again, this comes down to that whole thing around purpose. I know purpose is, is talked about in many organizations, in many individuals. But basically, like Simon Sinek, puts it, at the center of his, diagram in terms of why do I want to do something. So, for example, and this is going back to Ritesh's point earlier, the preteen is going to ask you the same question: why should I change? Why should I eat on time? Or why should I get up to go to school? So till the why is not answered, and it becomes very difficult, to get someone to get that change or make that change. The other aspect of it is also in terms of once that motivation is there. So, for example, when I was dealing with this dilemma of should I upskill or not, and I saw a lot of questions or comments in the chat around it. Is it in terms of technology? Is it an area that we alluded to earlier? I think the whole motivation was that, hey, there are all these new technologies, things which are happening, and I just want to know. I at least want to understand. I want to have a basic conversation with whoever. And I'd like to share a small anecdote, Abhishek, if you have a quick 30 seconds.
Sure.
One of my motivation for that comes from my 85-year-old grandmother. She's no more. But a few years ago, I got an urgent call, in the office from family. And then I stepped out, and then she said that she had a basic phone, and she said, I need to block people. There's some international callers calling her, and I need to block them. How do I do that? And I was like, first of all, why are international callers calling you? How did they get your number? And second, why do you want to block them? Just switch off your phone. But she wasn't satisfied with that answer. And she had this innate drive, curiosity to understand the phone. So much so, she was one of the first members in her family to get a smartphone. And she would teach us a lot of things, about the smartphone. Features we didn't know about, because she would keep exploring them throughout the day, trying out things. So and it came from her innate desire, from her innate curiosity, because she was somebody who studied up to class 9, and obviously had a very different worldview, but wanted to be there. So I think that motivation, the drive to change, sort of helps in that upskilling or reskilling in whichever area one wants to get into.
Right. And Ritesh, before you give your thoughts, I wanted to add another dimension to this question, and that I saw in the chat box, is around adopting to culture change of the new organization. So how do you, having worked so many years in a particular industry or an organization, you go into a new one, this onus is on you to adopt to that culture. How do you do that after so many years? It's a real fear of a lot of people.
It is, and Abhishek, I think it's as simple as if you've been living in a certain area and you're moving houses, you've got to think about how will I adapt. Or in your case, you were working in a culture which was within the same company. You are working in India, moving to a very different culture in the US, while the firm being same, the firm culture being same. But culture is not, like I said, is not defined by activity A, B, and C. It's defined by how people interact, how people work with each other. And I guess my only there's no one answer to the fact that how will you go about and adapt to a different culture in organization. I think in my view, what has worked with me in the past, I have changed a few organizations, and what has worked there is in each of the culture, while the culture may look very different from outside, but there would be things which will be common and which you can relate to. So you, when you walk into a new culture, you have to identify the anchor points which relate to your way of thinking and which is there in that culture. You find those anchor points, get yourself established, create an environment where there are things which probably will conflict with the way you think about a topic. The culture might be doing it in a different way. But if you think you can walk in and either try and change the culture just on the outside, I don't think that's possible. So you go in, get a strong footing, pick up the areas that you feel are connected with the way you think, find those footholds, and then try and influence to see what part of culture do I need to change to, what part of culture is something which I don't think is right for the organization that I'm working for, and how do I convince others to change the way they think. So it's a journey, but it has to start at some place where you have a strong footing on yourself.
Right. Right. No, thank you. And I think we are coming up to the top of the hour. One important point that came through in the chat is the role of mentors. And I wanted the two of you to focus on, have mentors played any role in your life, especially as you've managed some change like this? And what do you suggest to the audience about having a mentor in to begin with? Ritesh, do you want to go first?
Sure. So again, it's a very personal choice. To be fair, Abhishek, I think there are people who are very comfortable having one mentor and continuing with that mentor throughout your career or through a longer journey. Or there are people who have a mentor for what do I need to do for the future? There's a mentor who talks about if I'm in a problem, who do I go to? So you have subject matter experts in your mentor network, or at some point of time, you are left without a mentor and you think, what do I do now? So I think the definition of that mentor has to be very clear. What are you trying to seek? And it varies from individual to individual in terms of what drives it. In my case, I do believe there is a network of mentors that I work with. And for a different conversation, I go to a different person because I believe I will get a more honest and I'll get a more contextual answer than that to what I want. And that mentor, again, is not somebody limited to the organization, not somebody limited by age, and not somebody limited by your relationship to that person. In my view, a mentor is somebody who can help you, show a mirror to you, help you think through a particular situation, because the answer will typically lie in your head. It gets muddled up in a lot of other noise that comes in. Nobody's going to come in and give you a straight jacket answer saying do step A, B, and C, and your problem is solved.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. In fact, absolutely. I mean, I wholeheartedly recommend having not just one, but maybe several mentors. Just like Ritesh said, it could be a particular area, or it could be, in terms of a career, whichever. In fact, I would go to the extent of also saying that, mentors can be both within or, externally, it doesn't matter. The boundaries really don't matter. It basically depends on what is it that you are seeking to do. In fact, I'd also suggest that, you can also have a coach for a specific dilemma, and I have personally benefited from that, because they sort of help you think through, the individual think through in terms of where I am at point A and where do I want to go and what is it that I need to do to get there. And sort of all the answers come from within. So all that internal tension, is sort of, starts getting clarified. And to basically get there.
Great. We are at the top of the hour. Thank you both. I know it's a Friday evening, so I don't want to take away any more minute. Any last thoughts, rapid fire, Vinayak and Ritesh, just to sum up this conversation before we end?
I think, my current boss says, a career is a long journey. Don't think it's like a marathon. It's not a sprint.
It's test match versus
yeah,
2020. That's
exactly.
what he said there. Yeah.
Yeah. So take it as that. I think we will come up with various challenges. Not all answers will come in one day. Don't be impatient to jump to conclusions, to decisions which you probably may regret later. Take your time. Go about thinking through what it could be. Evaluate the entire situation, and you have an entire life to go out and try out different things.
Great, Vinayak.
Yeah, I just want to say that mid-career dilemmas are real, and they are refreshing because, in my view, they bring out the best in us. While we are going through it, it's like rough seas, but like they say, there is the rainbow at the end of the horizon. So that certainly comes out, but we need to keep at it. Seek the right help, guidance. Of course, ask a lot of questions and seek out answers. But it definitely pans out much better as we stay focused.
Great, thank you. On that positive note, thank you very much for being here. We enjoyed this discussion. I certainly did. Thank you, Aima, for organizing this. And with that, happy Makar Sankranti, Lori, Bihu, Pongal, whatever you celebrate, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you, Vinayak. Thank you, Aima.
Thank you, Vinayak and Ritesh.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Abhishek. Thanks, Ritesh. Thank you, Aima.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Bye.